my next video class and interrupts. Okay, so in that interrupts we have interrupts enable, that is IA, and interrupt priority. So right now we are dealing with the interrupt enable register. So this is also an 8-bit register. Okay, it is meant for, it is used for enabling and disabling the interrupts, whatever the interrupts we are going to use to enable the interrupts and also to disable the interrupts. We are going for interrupt enable register here. So in this case, again this is D0 bit, D1 bit, D2 bit, D3 bit, D4, D5, D6 and D7. Okay, we all know that D0 is the least significant and D7 is the most significant bit. Now, by this what we are going to say means, whenever I am going to use normal, I want to have the interrupt. Okay, I want to, in my program or in my function or in my whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to have the interrupt. So to enable that interrupt, this EA is used, that is enable interrupt, D7 bit. If EA is 1, if EA is mean this D7 bit is 1, let us think that D7 bit is 1. If D7 bit is 1, then we are going to say it is a enable interrupt. We are going to say it is a enable interrupt. For example, otherwise condition. What is otherwise condition? If D7 bit is 0, we are going to say it is a disable interrupt. Okay, when this bit is set to 1, it is an enable interrupt. When this bit is set to 0, it is a disable interrupt. And this D6 and D5 are not in use, they are used for the future purpose. Okay, whereas this D4 bit, it is an ES. ES means serial port interrupt. Whenever we know that there is a one serial port existed in 8051 microcontroller, so whenever we are going to have that serial port interrupt, so what we are going to say here, D4 bit, if D4 bit is equal to 1, if it is set to 1, that is D4 bit, that is ES, enable serial port interrupt, if this is set to 1, this D4 is set to 1, we are going to say that enable serial port interrupt. We are enabling the serial port interrupt. For example, otherwise if D4 is equal to 0, then what we are going to say? It is disabling the serial port interrupt. So guys, here in this interrupt enable register, when we are going to set 1, it is going to be enable. When you are going to set to 0, it is disable. Set to 0 is the otherwise condition, we can say that. Obviously, if when 1 is having the processing, other will be, it's not, it will be opposite. For example, here if I said it is set to 1 means it is enabling. If it is set to 0 means it is disabling. So what is going to be enable and what is going to disable, we have to know that. Okay, so in the starting D7 bit is completely enabling the interrupts. Okay, when it is set to 1, it is completely disabling the interrupts when it is set to 0. Similarly, here it is a serial port interrupt. When it is set to 1, it is enabling serial port. When it is set to 0, it is disabling the serial port. Okay. Next, coming to the D3 bit, it is in a timer overflow flag. So this is meant for the timer overflow. So when it is set to 1, this D3 is equal to 1. D3 is set to 1. It is enabling the timer. It is enabling the timer. Which timer? Timer 1. Why? Because we all know that the timers are 16-bit. Okay, sorry, 8-bit. In that the upper will be timer 1 and lower will be the timer 0, right? So in that what we are going to say, in that also we have T1 and T0. Okay, so T1 is meant for D3 bit and T0 is meant for D1 bit. Okay, whenever this is set to 1, it is enabling the timer 1 overflow. Timer 1 overflow flag, you have to remember that. When it is set to 0, it is disabling timer 1 overflow flag. Similarly, here T0 is there, nothing but timer 0. If this bit T1 is equal to 1, this bit is set is enable. If it is set to 0, this will be disable, which timer 0 overflow flag. Okay, you have to remember this one. Next, coming to the EX1 and EX0. EX is nothing but external interrupts. If you are accessing any external, we know that there are two external interrupts, right? So if you are accessing that external interrupt, there also you will be having interrupt 1 and interrupt 0. Okay, so similar way, if D2 is equal to 1, if this bit is equal to 1, it is set to 1, it is enabling external interrupts 1. If it is set to 0, it is disabling external interrupt 1. Okay. Similarly, if this bit is D0 is set to 1, it is enabling external interrupt 0. And if it is set to 0, it is disabling external interrupt 0. This is the explanation about the interrupt enable register. You have to remember that when any bit is going to be set to 1, it is enabling the thing, and if it is set to 0, it is disabling. But what you have going to enable and what you are going to disable, you have to know. Here you are going to enable the interrupts. This is meant for serial port, and this two D1 and D3 bits are meant for timer 1 overflow flag, and D2 and D0 is meant for the external interrupts.